Cloud computing didn't appear yesterday. We all know there's cloud. We all know there are cloud-related costs. But there's another aspect of the cloud, which is energy consumption. It's not a secret that data centers consume about 2% of the world's energy. And it affects the climate. It affects the so-called carbon emissions. And you've probably heard about the word FinOps already, which is managing your economic factors of your cloud consumption, how much it costs you. That is what FinOps is about. And if you've never heard about the greenops, which is the subject of today's conversation, if you're doing FinOps, if your organization is doing FinOps, not you personally, you may be already doing greenops, but you don't know what it's about. And they go sometimes hand in hand, sometimes not really. And to talk about it in a little bit more details, we'll try to keep it as high level as possible. I have with me today our cloud efficiency lead, the guy who cuts Microsoft bills in half, Stefan Denk. Stefan, maybe an intro from you as well, please.
Yeah, hey, thank you very much for hosting me again. Looking forward to sharing the learnings which we have from doing 3 years of full-blown FinOps and recently looking into greenops as an alternative way to look at your costs which you're incurring in the cloud, which I think is getting more and more relevant for companies inside the European Union, potentially worldwide, as governments are beginning to put some carbon emission, carbon certificate schemes into place, as investors are leaning on your board of directors in order to get a ESG story together. And this all of a sudden becomes yet one more problem, which is handed down to you from on high. And you may already be having a few answers which you are not aware of. And let's see if we can give you a few of these ideas today.
You dropped in the acronym ESG, and I'd like to explain it to those who haven't heard about it. Basically, ESG is like a concept of certain metrics in the governance of the company. And so E stands for environmental, S for social, and G for, well, governance itself. And what greenops is about, what this whole carbon emissions story is about, is the first letter, E, environmental. Does it reduce pollution? Does the company use energy efficiently? Does it manage waste and water responsibly? Does it care about climate change? So that's what greenops is about. And Stefan rightfully said that investors are looking into this. Yes, it is market dependent. And it's absolutely true that Europe pays much more attention than, for example, the United States. I have a graph here in front of me. I don't know if I can share it. I think it'll be a bit difficult. But what I can say is there's a comparison between different regions of the world and how much they care about the environment. And the EU is the champion, obviously. But United States actually is following. And the third one is Japan. Although Japan has more regulations and probably more stringent in terms of quietly chasing the targets. USA, even with the current administration, is not far behind. Okay, so it's good that you mentioned a potential investor interest, which is, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's all about investing in socially responsible companies because it's just a good thing to do. I don't know. I can't really put my finger on it why they choose specifically such socially responsible companies, but also there's government regulation. And there's quite a lot.
It's not just a woke bit about let's invest only in companies who are do-gooders. It is actually that the European Union has been talking about carbon emission and putting carbon tax out there already for quite a while. We had these discussions in the past years, and in the course of this year and next, it has been kicked down the road a little bit. We can talk about that one, that there has been an extension to the deadline given by then you have, or by which date you have to have your carbon reporting and a ESG story together as a company which qualifies, and virtually any company within the European Union or doing business within the European Union which can afford a software asset management and a licensing expert will be subject to these new rulings. They have to come up with these numbers, and it affects their rating. So this means the cost of capital, the investment, and there are also more and more funds which take ESG as one of the metrics by which they are deciding to invest or not to invest. So you can still get to capital even if you are very environmentally unfriendly, but especially in Europe, it begins to be helpful for the company to at least have a good story together so that your access to capital is good and that you are getting also lower premiums, for example, from your insurance companies where you are buying insurance. So this is what's something I heard from a colleague of mine who is a former head in the reinsurance company. He was responsible for damage caused by natural catastrophe and cyber around the world. And for him, ESG is a super big topic because it's basically driven through the insurers into the companies. And for that industry sector, it's actually a pretty big thing. So I would say it may not be front and center for what you need to do, but it's definitely being discussed and maybe handed down to your board of directors and from there to the CEO and CFO. And it may just be sitting on your CIO's shoulder as yet another problem coming from on high, which he or she may not have a good answer for.
Actually, since you don't want to call this a reinsurance company, I think I can guess what that company is because they have a public case. They're mentioned all over the internet. So up to you. I just want to give the viewers some figures of who is affected by the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive in the EU. There are three metrics, so you must tick two of those three, not just one, two of those three. Balance sheet total exceeding 25 million. Net turnover annual, 50 million, which are pretty big numbers. They're pretty big numbers. And average number of employees above 250, which is kind of not really that big figure. 250 employees is what, upper small business, lower mid-sized business in Europe. So quite a few companies are affected. And this was supposed to kick in mid-2024. However, it didn't properly kick in. So the conversation is ongoing, and I think the deadline already has been moved to June 2026 for everybody to comply. But another consultation is ongoing to raise the bar for the number of employees to 1,000, which effectively will remove about 80% of potentially affected companies. Still, 1,000 employees is not that high number. So I would imagine, since we are some experts, we work mostly with companies from 1,000, actually from 5,000 employees, and still a big market. So all of those clients are potentially affected when they operate in the EU, and I'm guessing even international companies with the EU presence would have to somehow comply with this. And this is a legal directive. So, okay, so fine. We're talking about the cloud. You are a cloud expert, and on this directive, the whole ESG, the whole energy component of it is split into three scopes. Are they called scopes, as far as I remember? So first scope is what sort of carbon emissions I produce directly. So, for example, I have machinery, or I have ovens, I have some kind of manufacturing equipment that produces carbon emissions directly. So that's scope one. Probably not affecting insurance companies because they don't have such production facilities. Who knows?
They have huge data centers usually to bring this one up. They are actually producing a whole lot of carbon emissions through the running of their data centers.
On-premises data centers. So that is scope one. It's your direct impact. Then there's scope two, which is impact on the environment through the consumed energy. So you buy energy from somebody produces that energy, and then they also emit, carbon-based gases. And therefore, that is scope two, indirect. Scope three is the one that we're probably talking about today, is your cloud consumption, is what you buy, is what you buy from other providers and outsourcers. An impact of that, of the resources you consume from those outsourcers and cloud environments on the environment. Is that correct?
Yes. So the scope one is you run your own data center in your own facilities, and then it depends on which kind of energy you are buying. Are you, for example, based in Poland, where we have a coal, oil, gas firing mix with a huge impact on coal? There you have way more carbon dioxide per kilowatt hour than you would have, for example, in Norway, where the overwhelming majority of electricity is generated by hydropower. So this is big a big decision point going forward, also with the selection of a cloud location. If you still have the liberty to choose where you are placing your IT, then if you are considering going to a cloud hoster, it does not have to be the public cloud providers. But what we can already see is that depending on where you are choosing the region, if you are putting the region, for example, into a colder climate where you have to spend less money and less electricity for cooling, if you are putting it not into a tropical climate where you have the extra energy intensivity that you have very moist air and very warm air, which is even harder to cool against. And you, for example, put this again into the Nordics where you have colder air, so you can use ambient air for cooling. You have cheap electricity. This is giving you a completely different footprint for running at the end of the day the very same workload, because you need to buy less energy to produce 1 hour of compute. And this is also some of the units which we can work with. And this is then where this whole thing moves from the high level conversation to a FinOps and volumetrics conversation. Because at the end of the day, what you can do, depending on the area of the world where you're based in, you can add a certain number of kilowatt hours per hour of compute, per hour of a terabyte in storage for other activities. So it's still pretty coarse grained, not as super fine grained as the focus data, for example, is for the public clouds. But this data is getting made available either by companies like Etsy, who have published their own journey to the cloud and provide some of these usage metrics, as well as by the 3 big cloud providers with their respective cloud carbon footprints and the portals for that.
So let me try and understand this. If I'm consuming services from the 3 big cloud providers, or Oracle Cloud as well, as far as I know, they also publish, they have a bit of a different model, but they also publish those metrics. So effectively, if I want to calculate my carbon footprint, they publish metric for not, as you said, not that maybe what's what I'm looking for.
Granular?
Not as granular. Yes, thank you. But we can, for example, there's a value for an hour of a vCPU consumption. So those metrics are published. They calculated them. Oracle, as far as I know, publishes them per region. I'm not sure. I didn't dig deep into AWS and Amazon and Google whether they publish them per region, which probably should be the case because, as you just said, in the Nordics, it could be 100% renewable energy. And somewhere in the Middle East, it will be probably 100% coal and oil. So, and then it should be a simple calculation, shouldn't it? What you consume multiplied by those metrics, that's your number.
It kind of goes like this, and this is what we see in the portals which are currently out there. So it tends to give you 3 factors when it comes to the data center, because initially you need to invest energy to build a data center. So this is the upstream investment before you are actually producing the first vCPU hour or the first terabyte hour in your data center. Then you have the operational lifetime of your data center, where you have a certain, they call it power usage efficiency. PUE is one of the 2 important metrics. The other is water usage efficiency, WUE. The PUE depends on the energy mix which you are buying. Again, as you said, Middle East or Poland will have a different PUE than the Nordics. For other places around the world, there are also differences which the cloud providers publish. And then eventually you will have components in the data center getting retired. And then the big question is, can these, for example, be recycled, reused, given a second life when they are retired after 5 years of depreciation? Or are they simply scrapped, thrown away, and put into a landfill? And these three components are displayed at least on the Azure Carbon portal. Microsoft is also working on providing APIs where you can build your own visualization, and there are some tools out there for Power BI premium users, where Microsoft has some pre-made reports. The data on their side tends to be lagging about 2 to 3 months, and it is not super, super granular, but at least you get to see what each of your subscription consumes. With Google, it's going down to the project level. So this is like a resource group in Azure. So Google is more fine granular and also more real-time-ish. It's not perfect real-time. AWS is somewhere along the lines of Azure, but what we have found in our research, and please correct us if we have gotten this one wrong, is that AWS does not include their own Scope 3 into what they are displaying. So you are actually getting a reasonably complete but partially incomplete picture with the AWS bill. But still,
Correct.
I mean, having a not perfect tool is way better than flying completely blind.
You're correct about AWS. They indeed do not include their own Scope 3 in the calculations. So the names of the tools, let me read them from my from our research. So Azure has emission impacts dashboard, which is unfortunately only limited to enterprise agreement and MCA clients. And MCA also underpins CSP, so should be available to CSP clients as well. AWS's tool is called Customer Carbon Footprint Tool, and Google Cloud provides actually the most detailed of them all. Funny enough, it's a carbon footprint tool. It's called Carbon Footprint. But yes, so they are available. How trustworthy are they, or is it better to use a third-party tool?
Well, the thing is, you have to rely on the hardware measurements which the cloud providers did, because you cannot really measure the hardware. If you're running this in your own data center, there are tools out there which have been provided by the tool vendors, and I don't remember the name of the tool which Microsoft, for example, created freeware for that, which you can use in your own data center. It's one of the system tools which you can install on your server, and it really measures physical power information from your basically from the power plug to the exhaust, which allows you to get a very good reading on how much it costs you in your own data center to produce a vCPU hour. For the public data centers where you do not have host level access to actually measure the power intake of your physical components, you have to trust the public providers telling you a reasonably accurate story. So again, it's not perfect, but it's better than nothing. And now to spin this in the direction of where FinOps gets into this pictures, FinOps has a huge part about workload optimization. Rate optimization doesn't really help you. I mean, if you're reserving a virtual machine and you're paying 60% less for it, but it remains on 24/7, then FinOps helps you save money on the VM by doing this reservation. From a greenops ESG point of view, it doesn't matter if you are buying the VM cheap or you're buying it expensive. If it runs 24 hours, it is equally bad for the environment. Or it has equal impact, not necessarily bad. I mean, if it's doing a good thing, then it has the equal impact on the environment. But what we are getting towards with FinOps is the workload optimization, which asks you to switch off unnecessary consumption. So a virtual machine which you do not need, storage which you are not actively using anymore, if you can remove these resources from your subscriptions, if you can downsize a virtual machine, if you can downsize a disk, then this is freeing up capacity, which at the end of the day allows the big cloud providers to serve more people with the same physical equipment and with the same intake as if you are keeping all these resources on idle. And another one I found super interesting is that if you have a PC which is completely on idle, it takes like 50% of the power versus the PC running on full load. So it's actually hugely wasteful to have a lot of virtual machines and other systems sitting on idle. It's much better for the cloud provider and then their own reporting if their systems are pretty busy, which at the current time and the numbers that we see, if you look at the median utilization, it's in the single digits.
I want to remind the viewers, if you're watching us live right now, which is 9th of April, 3:20 p.m. United Kingdom, Please ask your questions in the chat. We'll answer them. We'll take them. We'll answer your questions in the chat. We'll be live for another roughly 5 to 7 minutes. Well, unfortunately, we have to drop off at the bottom of the hour. If you're watching it recorded, write your questions, either just DM us or write your questions in the comments to the video or on LinkedIn, and we'll take them. We'll answer all the questions that may bother you. Stefan, thank you. You touched on an interesting subject. I don't know if the listeners noticed it. So, in general, FinOps and GreenOps go hand in hand. If we're talking about right sizing, obviously, if you're right sizing your environments, you get both financial benefits and GreenOps benefits. Your carbon footprint goes down. But yes, there are a few areas. You just brought up the always running virtual machines, which may, if you reserve them or you take spot VMs, they may cost you less, but the carbon footprint doesn't go down. And if GreenOps is more important, then maybe you need to review even your FinOps approaches. Are there any other examples of where FinOps and GreenOps I wouldn't say the conflict. It's not the right word to say. They need balancing.
Yeah, and not in all cases do the two goals go in the same direction. And sometimes you need to make a trade-off decision. What is more important, because you may be pulled in different directions. We took Norway as a country which has a basically pure hydrocarbon energy mix, but the region in Norway is, for example, more expensive than the region in Sweden or Northern Europe, which has a different mix. So there, if you're looking for the most cost-efficient region to deploy, it is not the one where you are having the access to the most reliable hydro energy, which is still one of the cleanest ways of creating energy, which we have on this planet for now. So you can be pulled in these different directions. With regards to the costing with the spot VMs, I actually kind of disagree with this research with this research pointer which we found when we were doing this query, because the idea of a spot VM is that you are using it not for workloads which run 24/7, because a spot VM can be pulled away from you on very short notice. There, the idea is more like that you are able to burst workloads which you need to get completed quickly by tens, hundreds, thousands of virtual machines, Databricks being an example. And there it does not really make an impact from GreenOps. Again, GreenOps doesn't care if you are taking a regular VM or a spot VM. But if you have this scale out to 1,000 VMs to solve a data task, collect the results, and then scale it back down when you have the results ready, if you do this with spot VMs, you can actually save like 80 to 90% of your cost. So I think there are many cases where one doesn't care, but the other benefits. And there are fewer cases that they're really going in two different directions. And it's a choice at the end of the day. What do you want to optimize against? And you'll probably have to optimize a little bit against both. But the good news is, and as we are approaching slowly the end of the session, is that if you've already been busy doing FinOps and you have already optimized your workload, you have already right-sized your VMs, then you may actually be sitting on an ESG storyline, on an ESG narrative, which maybe you haven't tapped into. And even you migrating to the public cloud may already be a storyline that you can tap into, because if you're coming from a coal-powered electricity grid using diesel generators for backup energy on your data center, and you are moving to a huge private cloud provider or a public cloud provider, which is already carbon neutral and may even become carbon positive in the future, which is the global trend of these hyperscale data centers, then just moving out of your existing on-prem data center towards a hosted data center or a public cloud may already be a ESG narrative you can spin credibly.
I would like to research it further for myself, because when I hear that somebody migrated to the cloud with the help of a large integrator, massive outsourcer, I'm talking about really big names, don't want to call them now, and they publish a case saying we completely zeroed out our carbon footprint, I don't believe it. I have serious doubts about going from 100% carbon footprint to zero, because they just moved to somebody else's cloud, even to a fully renewable region like we just brought up, Norway, a couple of times. Because I can understand that, yes, it can reduce it, because probably these large data centers, they chase those metrics for various reasons, not necessarily only because they're demanded by the law, but also just to provide their clients another peace of mind that, by moving to this cloud, they don't impact the environment. I just don't believe in the story of completely reducing it to zero. It just, I don't know. But yeah.
It doesn't go to zero entirely. What it can do, it can definitely reduce the power intake, because if you think about that, the biggest cost, I would guess, for every hyperscale cloud provider is going to be electricity. The amount of electricity they buy to run their servers and their storage and the cooling. And it's not just altruistic, woke, green left, let's save the planet. It's actually, if we can get this data center more efficient, so we need to buy in less kilowatt hours, including the cooling to produce 1 vCPU hour to produce 1 terabyte hour, it's profit, because it directly hits the bottom line. And this is, I think, why for these hyperscale cloud providers, it's way more top of mind to drive these efficiencies. Well, when you're having a reasonably small data center running a few hundred servers, or maybe 1,000, 2,000 servers, this is for you just a way smaller position, unless you're hitting, for example, the maximum grid capacity which your utility company offers you. Then all of a sudden you need to think about being more efficient with the electricity you pull in. For the cloud provider, this is the biggest cost. And you may just be able to benefit off that. So not down 100%, but probably down 70, maybe even 80%. If you're going from coal-fired diesel generator backed up towards a hydroelectric, carbon neutral, huge data center in a hyperscaler environment, I kind of see that.
As a closing question, since we're coming to the end of the planned live session, obviously clients coming to us will get this information from us. We'll help them, I should say, that they are actually reducing their carbon footprint. But for those listeners who just want to do it themselves, where do they start?
I would say do a search in your favorite search engine for whatever cloud you are using, carbon footprint, so Azure carbon footprint, AWS carbon tooling. You can take a whole lot from there. What also works really well, which I found, is if you're already using the large language models with deep research. If you ask, for example, a ChatGPT 4.5 or a o3 mini high with deep research enabled to tell you what you with your position can do about carbon footprint with your computing, you get damn good answers, which are getting you some really good ideas how to act on that. And also feel free to ask it questions what besides IT you can do, because there are a few more quick wins, like your HVAC situation, your travel policy, many other things. And it may be easier as you think to create a credible ESG story, get access to cheaper capital, and save your company some costs along the lines, which is the beauty when you really do combine workload optimization and FinOps with the greenops input to ESG, because then you are paying less money for your cloud environment while having this positive story for the environment. So this is not even greenwashing, but this is a greener IT with an immediate positive impact on your bottom line within the same fiscal year. And this is in the end where we are so interested in that, because we think that if you do optimize the workloads in the cloud, you are getting your green IT story for free as a bonus on top. And we love for free bonuses on top.
Stefan, thank you very much for this introduction today for our viewers and listeners. This will be published as a podcast as well. We will come back to this subject 100% this year. We are live usually every second Wednesday, sometimes more often than that. You can follow us on LinkedIn. You can follow us on Apple Podcasts. You can follow us on YouTube. This is our YouTube is our primary channel. And as I said, send us your questions. We are very interested in your questions. Sometimes the direction of these channels is driven by our community feedback. Thanks a lot, Stefan. Thanks again. And thanks everybody who's been with us today. And yeah, unfortunately, this session is shorter than usual.
Yeah. Thank you for
Goodbye.
hosting me,
Have a
Sasha.
great rest of the week.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.